Let's not do 8 hours though.
Live. On that one.
On that one.
Yeah.
Is it rolling now?
You're live.
Sound. Oh yeah, it's coming through. Great. I could see myself. Hello folks. Welcome to Spartanlifecoach live. We've done this before, but not exactly like this. So we're in a studio tonight. So the sound should be a little bit clearer and the video quality should be somewhat clearer. As usual, I will be answering topics related to any mental health issues, narcissistic abuse, particularly. People usually want to ask me about recovery from Cptsd, recovery from narcissistic abuse. If you are going to ask a question, try and keep it succinct. I've got my mate Rich is helping me here as well from Success 4. So he's going to help me go through the questions. Try and keep it like one sentence or two sentences in plain English and end the question with a question mark. And if you are going to ask questions, they don't all have to be serious. You can ask me about anything at all. You can ask me about something ridiculous or completely inappropriate if you like. They're your questions. Have any of the questions come through?
Not yet. No.
Okay.
Do I have to press a button?
No.
No.
Are you seeing anything in the live chat?
Nothing in the live chat now.
You might see it on YouTube. Are you on YouTube or Google Hangouts?
I'm on Google Hangouts.
So if you open the YouTube bar,
okay.
then you'll see him. So we're figuring this out as we go as well. Okay.
So you're live on your YouTube. On your YouTube channel?
Yes, I've got a question here.
Okay.
That is flying past. Whoa, let me see if I can control this.
Okay.
Looking great, Richard. Thanks, Nancy. How to deal with my boyfriend's narcissistic child. Okay, I'll answer that. Could a flashback be caused by something pleasant or needed in childhood you didn't experience, like comfort, kindness, care, or is that something else? Yes, a flashback definitely can be caused by the realization that you're being given something now that you didn't get in childhood that's going to remind you of what you didn't get. So very commonly, I'll speak to massage therapists or people who do Reiki, and they'll tell me that when they're working with a client, as they're doing the work with them and they start to get into the session, sometimes their clients just begin crying. Now, this can be because of a specific memory or an event that has come up. But I think a lot of times when this happens is in that context, you're receiving attention and care and hands-on healing. Well, if you think about that, how that applies to what should happen with children, children should be receiving concentrated, pure attention and care from a singular source, and they should be being touched with an intent that is positive, which is what you would hopefully get if you're getting like massage therapy or Reiki or some kind of hands-on healing. And the realization from you're having a positive experience that the thing that you're getting right now from a stranger, from a professional, is something that you didn't get in childhood. Yeah, that can cause an emotional flashback, or it can just cause grief. It can just cause sadness. So yes, pleasant experiences can also induce emotional flashbacks. Another person asked the question, how should I deal with my boyfriend's narcissistic child? There is no such thing as a narcissistic child. There's no such thing. Well, there's such a thing as a child who is narcissistic, with the adjective narcissistic with a little n. Children are supposed to be narcissistic. They're supposed to have something called healthy narcissism. It was Freud who came up with the term narcissism. And when you are a toddler and when you're very, very young, you're supposed to think the world revolves around you. This helps with the healthy formation of an ego. Then as you grow and develop, you're supposed to realize, oh, there are other people out there. They also have their own fears and wants and needs and drives, and they have their separate egos as well. But anybody who is under the age of 14 or 15, you can't really say that they have full-blown NPD, because the ego has not yet had a chance, the personality hasn't had a chance to properly form yet. So strictly speaking, there's no such thing as an NPD child. If you're saying his child as in they're actually 21 years old, but they happen to be his child, but they're not actually a youth as such, then you know, if you think there's some behavioral problems there, that's something that you've got to address directly with your boyfriend. You've got to make it very clear what you're seeing, how you're perceiving it. You're going to have to present that in a diplomatic way because you're talking about somebody's child and it's likely to make them defensive. Try and present it in a way that is balanced and as non-judgmental as possible, and just say exactly what you're feeling about it. Say what you are perceiving. Don't say what you know. Don't say this person is being abusive. Say when they do this, it makes me feel as though this is what's going on. Is usually the correct language pattern to move forward with this kind of a situation effectively. I think I got that from couples therapy. In fact, I'm pretty sure I got that from relationship therapy. So instead of saying, when you do that, I know it's because you're a bastard, you say, when you do that, it makes me feel as though you don't care about me. So you use the right psychological language. I can see in the corner of my eye that these questions are flying in.
They are. I can ask you one out loud now.
If you could ask me one out loud, that would be great.
I can do all of this together.
Oh, awesome.
Right,
Togetherness.
We'll have a go.
Okay.
Right, Kesley Renee asks, do you think there could be a link between traumatic abuse and vitamin deficiency?
Not as far as I'm aware. Unless I don't know what the link would be. Like if somebody has been traumatically abused, are you saying the body becomes deficient in certain vitamins? The only way that would happen is if you're having a very extreme, is if you're trying to correlate between a very extreme stress response, a lot of cortisol, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of anxiety flowing through the body, and that diminishing or burning out the reserves of vitamins. Maybe, but not something I would know all that much about. Am I gazing into the right camera here?
You were into this one. Now we're on the wide.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've gone wide.
Lewis Andrew asks, at what point can you tell when the fog is cleared and your thoughts are your own?
It's going to be down to how you feel. I mean, you're talking about the fog is clearing and your thoughts have become your own. So presumably you feel like your thoughts are not yours right now. Presumably you feel like your consciousness has been hijacked by somebody else. It'll feel very, very different. There's no real question when you're recovering that you are recovering. You'll know absolutely that you have returned. To people outside of this community and outside of this experience, this will sound like fucking gobbledygook and spiritual, like a sort of a more spiritual woo type of stuff. But for those of us who've experienced this, what happens is narcissistic abuse in the context of a tyrannical parent is the tyrannical parent forcing their worldview, their emotions and their needs as an adult, like the worldview and the needs of a 40 or 50-year-old onto, you know, this tiny little 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old vessel. And it means that the self of the child who it's being forced upon shrinks in response to that, because it has to make room for this stuff that's coming through that's very intense and very adult. As we grow up, that would usually create a fawning, enabling, codependent response. And so the self has shrunk. And so we're used to creating space for a tyrannical, invading, oppositional force that forces itself through our boundaries into our space. And then once it has taken over, that tiny little self that is left, it then indoctrinates that little self, brainwashes it, so that even the thoughts that it's thinking, it doesn't know that it's its own. When you're actually healing and you're reversing that process, and you would do that through grieving, you would do that through developing your emotional literacy. As you become more emotionally literate, you are leading yourself gently and compassionately, but with discipline, back towards acknowledging your own needs and saying, this is how I feel about this situation. This is how the situation makes me feel. And as you acknowledge your feelings, you start to acknowledge the self. As you acknowledge the emotions in the self has the space to then, it's like working a muscle. As the muscle works day by day, it starts to come back. And then you dare to feel. And then the unconscious goes, oh, we can do this whenever we want. We don't need some weird exercises or a weird course or hypnosis that brings us back to this. We're just going to do this automatically. Once you've started doing it automatically and it's become automatic or semi-automatic for 2, 3, 4 weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks become a couple of months, then you're going to start noticing that you're coming back to yourself and that your thoughts are your own and you're coming out of the fog. There'll be no question whatsoever. If there is any doubt, there is no doubt. I think I took that from Robert De Niro in the that CIA film. What was it called? No, not The Last Samurai. He's an ex-CIA agent. Sean Bean is in it. Sean Bean pretends he was in the SAS, but he doesn't know the colour of the boathouse at Hereford.
Well, that's a problem.
Yeah, he doesn't know the colour of the boathouse at Hereford. That's what Rob De Niro calls it, Hereford. I can't remember the name of that. Ronin. I knew there was something about samurai. So in that, he says, what we used to say in the CIA is, if there is any doubt, there is no doubt. So if you have any doubt, it probably hasn't fully come back yet. You're probably still in the fog. You're probably still thinking another person's thoughts. Don't panic. You know, that happens. It's a natural part of the process. Give yourself the space and the time to heal. And the way to heal is through emotional literacy. It's through acknowledging how you feel. And you might cry, and you might feel sad, and then you might feel angry. And this is good. This is my job, is to make people feel sad and angry and then charge them money. Welcome to the Spartan Life Coach.
Princess Farrar, sorry if I'm pronouncing your names wrong, guys. Princess Farrar says, and there's couple of people have asked this question, how do I know if I'm high-functioning autism or it's Cptsd stroke BDP? BPD.
BPD. There's a lot of acronyms in this field. The Cptsd and the BPD and the ASPD. I don't know how you would subjectively know if it's high-functioning autism. I mean, autism isn't my speciality, and I certainly have no awareness of any self-reflective tests that are done to see if you're on the autism spectrum. If you're here and you're asking me that question, it would indicate that people would usually think of themselves as being autistic if they have a problem registering the meta communication of others, and it regularly causes them conflict or trouble. Maybe not conflict. It might cause conflict, or it might cause isolation. So if you regularly have trouble dealing with the meta communication of others, meaning not their verbal communication, but their body language, and you struggle to fit in, and you struggle to know what other people mean, and when people tell jokes, you're like, is that a joke, or is it serious, or I'm not sure. There's a very, very common thing that is well covered by Cptsd. That could totally be complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And one day we may even find that when people are on the autism spectrum, that response is caused by trauma, is caused by complex post-traumatic stress disorder sometimes. As I said, I don't really know enough about autism. I did wonder myself if I was, because of those kinds of difficulties, but it's very well covered by Cptsd. If the reason you're asking if you are autistic or on the spectrum is because of that kind of thing, where you can't fit in, you can't be normal, normal makes you feel sick or weird or freaked out or anxious or depressed, consider the potential childhood roots of this. If as a child you were very, very heavily scrutinized and judged and shamed and guilted regularly all the time, brainwashing, hypnosis, feel guilty, feel ashamed, then being around other humans is triggering. Communication is triggering. Even kindness can become triggering, because you're so, to use a slightly gross metaphor, you're so stripped of skin, because the skin represents boundaries. It represents protection from the outside. And if that is stripped, I get sick, I get viruses, I get infections. So the external boundary wall is so broken and so scrubbed away that you just become very open and vulnerable to infection from the outside world. Then, yeah, you're going to find a lot of things very triggering. And that might have caused you to get to the point where you're like, I'm high functioning autistic because I can communicate, I can take care of myself, I can hold down a job, but I'm not really connecting in a way I want to with other people. That lack of connection can just be because the whole attachment style that you developed has become damaged, or was damaged for you in childhood by abuse that was either overt or covert. I mean, many people think that they weren't abused because nobody put cigarettes out on their eyelids, but there are a lot of ways of not giving children what they need to such an extent that it causes them to have problems for the rest of their life.
Adita Chopra asks, how do you deal with permanent rage alternating with chronic fatigue, stroke hopelessness after being raised in an abusive home?
What was the lady's name?
Aditya.
And her second name?
Chopra.
Okay. So, yeah, there should be online forums for. I've spoken to a lot of people. As you might know, I lived in Malaysia, and a lot of my friends were Indian, and this can be such a prevalent problem that some Indian clients came to me and they said this is actually an Indian problem. But then I would also say that like a lot of Catholics have come to me and said it's a Catholic problem, or Italian people come to me and they go, oh, all Italians are like this. We're all, you know, the way it's set up is like this. But there is a theme, there is a recurrent theme that I've seen coaching people. Rage is possibly due to you being raised in an environment where your boundaries were shattered. And then rage is a very natural mammalian response. If there was a lot of screaming and shouting and hitting in your childhood, and I mean lots of it, as in a few times a week, you need to have the compassion for yourself and for your siblings to realize that as children, that's too much stress for the system to deal with. It becomes overwhelming. That much adrenaline starts to a huge adrenaline surge in a child's body, and a huge amount of terror will knock your consciousness out of the body. It will actually cause you to dissociate. So the hopelessness and helplessness and depression that you're feeling is a Cptsd response of freeze and flight, because you couldn't escape. The stress was overwhelming. So bang, out the body you go. So you dissociate. So hopelessness, depression, lethargy. You don't want to get anything done. You just can't be bothered. You certainly can't be bothered to take care of yourself, because nobody taught you that you were worth being taken care of. In fact, you were being taught that you were worth less and not worth taking care of. So that's something that needs to be developed, that needs to be worked on. And then the rage is the resentment. Now, the resentment is twofold. It's in its root, it's to who did this to you, which I'm presuming is your primary caregivers, your parents in your childhood home, in your family environment. If not, then it would have been maybe aunties, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers who lived in the home, people you could not escape and you saw on a daily basis. This sounds like a response to long-term, fairly systematic and quite dramatic abuse, and it is common and it is fixable, and you're not alone. There are many people out there who've had the same experience as you, and we have this wonderful thing called social media and the internet, and when we use it wisely and with discipline, it can be a great way of connecting with other people and healing. And I recommend that you try and do that, because there are other people who've gone through the same experience as you, who have the same cultural coordinates that you do. So it's useful to connect on that level. The rage, remember, is a fight response to stress. You are now feeling aggression, but it's twofold. It's resentment to whoever did it, but it's also self-loathing. So you'll never, I'm a recovering rageaholic. And what I try to remember in my recovery phase was, you're never angrier than when you're angry with yourself. So if I started to get really, really angry, I would always say, well, what am I angry with myself about? What did I fail to do? And a lot of my rage towards myself, when I looked a little deeper, A, it was masking sadness, and B, it was anger that I didn't protect myself. So diminishing that rage systemically, and this is going to sound totally counterintuitive. You think like you should be doing breathing exercises or telling yourself to calm down. Forget all that shit, because it's not going to work. This is childhood trauma. Childhood trauma does not respond to surface level plasters on the skin. It's deep, deep, deep work that needs to be done. It's systemic work. You will feel less rage when you learn to express the sadness, the tremendous reservoir of sadness that you hold inside of you, and that grief, in your own time, in your own way, organically, as part of developing a better relationship with yourself and of taking care of yourself in the way that you were not taken care of. And the other thing is forgiving yourself. You were a child. You had no tools and you had no means of escape. It's not like you could just get your bank card out and take a holiday from your parents or something. And it's not as though you could distinguish exactly what was going on. When we're children and our ego boundaries are very, very soft, we think everything that happens is kind of we're doing it. That's why we feel such tremendous guilt. So if our parents beat the shit out of us, we feel guilty because we know it's wrong, but we kind of, it's a subtle psychoanalytic point to get, but we kind of feel like our parents are us. So if you were raised If you're Bosnian and you're in Sarajevo and soldiers come and start shooting everybody up and killing them, and you're 3 or 4 years old, you are Sarajevo. You are the soldiers who are attacking, and you are everything that is in there. This isn't a philosophical point. This is a psychoanalytic point that I'm trying to make. At those young ages, when there's rage and hostility in the house, that's you. That's what you think. You're wrong as a child, but you have no ego boundaries. There's no emotional maturity there for you to sit back and go, oh, my dad's going through a midlife crisis and my mum is struggling with her addiction to shopping. And you can't be like, these guys are just dicks. Never mind. It's all you. And it's very, very upsetting. So compassion for the fact that you didn't protect yourself and that you couldn't protect yourself, and that pattern played out later in life with boyfriends, with husbands, with other people. You didn't protect yourself from them. Forgive yourself. I got deep real quick.
Right. They're saying that they can't hear me very well. So
shout.
Okay. So I'm gonna have to do this as loud as I can shout. So Katie asks, what do you think about The Secret? It's so widespread, and I find it ultimately cultish and abusive because they pressure you to be positive all the time. Maybe repeat the question.
Yeah.
In some sort of form.
What do you think about The Secret? Katie said, what do you think about The Secret? Because she thinks it's cultish because they pressure you to be happy all the time. I think The Secret is a monstrous load of dog shit that if you have CPTSD and have experienced childhood trauma, The Secret and multiple schools of thought like that say that everything that we do is self-created and self-chosen, then will lead you to the conclusion that you must have created your own rape, that you must have created your own torture, that you must have created your own kidnap, that you must have created your own abuse, which is palpably absurd and extremely toxic and damaging. And it comes from, I can see the philosophical development of how this came about. It's a corruption of older teachings that were rooted in truth. We're not going to have a discussion about Christian mysticism and Hinduism and Buddhism here. There isn't time, and it's not the appropriate space for it. But these are corruptions of good teachings. The idea that you're creating your reality, if you take that at a very simplistic level, which The Secret does, monstrously simplistic, then you're going to come to absurd and conclusions that are quite frankly abusive. It's a kind of like tertiary abuse. So it happened to you, and now you're being told that everything that ever happened to you is because you thought it. I mean, if anybody ever said that to me, I would headbutt them as hard as I could and then say, well, you made that because you're ultimately responsible for everything that happens in your reality. Stop crying. Yes, your nose is broken. I'll drive you to the hospital now. I've made my philosophical point. Next question.
EM, that's the letters.
EM.
My best friend is being hoovered via text by her Mpd mother after months of silence. What line of reasoning can she use to decide or to reply or to go grey rock? She desperately craves recollection. The Wrecker one. She wants to see her.
she craves reconciliation with her NPD mother who's hoovering her via text. It's not for you to say that your best friend's mother has NPD. And from this, I'm like three people removed in this situation. Certainly not for me to say that the mother has NPD. But for the sake of fun and for philosophical debate, let's imagine that she does. If she really is hoovering her daughter via text and her daughter is still hooked on the idea of her mother being her mother, and of course she is, why wouldn't she be? It's a primary drive to want your mother, the goddess of your childhood, to love you. We want really nothing else. Of course she's going to want that. And the hoovering and the texting is probably now coming as part of like almost sadomasochistic cycle where this person is hopeful, but then they lose hope, and then they're hopeful, and then they lose hope. This person is going to have to decide for themselves how they want to proceed in their relationship with their mother. So if your best friend chooses it, she can have some kind of relationship with her mother. But if her mother does have NPD, then she needs to realize that it needs to be within very strict constraints. And if the mother does have NPD, every contact is an opportunity to abuse. Every contact is an opportunity to hook her back into some nonsense, to shame her, to guilt her, and make her feel bad about herself, because that's what the mother is. She's a machine of making others feel bad if she has NPD.
Patrick DePrimo asks, any tips to get over feelings of shame? It's very hard to read, press buttons, and also...
The louder you get, the posher you sound.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know.
Are there any tips for getting over feelings of shame? I guess, like, it depends on where the shame comes from. I mean, if it's toxic shame, you know, the kind of thing that we would talk about as a result of childhood abuse, then really it's the childhood trauma that needs to be healed from. It's the Cptsd of that childhood trauma that needs to be healed from. If you're feeling toxic shame because, I mean, it's not always active abuse that does it. It can be passive abuse. It could be neglect that's doing it. You know, for a start, it's recognizing that and then working through it and remembering that it is an emotional flashback. So it still falls within the Cptsd spectrum. So the extent to which you can develop your emotional literacy, work through your emotional flashbacks, all of which I've got material and I've systemized ways of doing that, and reducing the Cptsd and learning to be more compassionate and more loving and with yourself, and to develop a better relationship with yourself, is the extent to which the shame, the feelings of shame, will go away. If it's not toxic shame and you're doing something in your adult life that makes you feel shame, stop it. Just do something else. Don't waste your time with stuff that makes you feel ashamed. So I'm not sure. I imagine it was toxic shame from childhood, but if you're doing stuff in adulthood that makes you feel shame, just stop doing it. Do something else.
Boomers27 asks, should I be fully recovered from narc abuse before embarking on a life coach career? Very good question.
Boomer says, should I be fully recovered from narcissistic abuse before embarking on a life coach career? Nothing is perfect. And the way that I approach enterprise and getting shit done, that keeps me getting shit done, because I used to be a terrible procrastinator, is that line from Leonard Cohen, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So just do it. Would be my standard advice for most things. However, if you are life coaching or counseling people, especially if you're life coaching or dealing with the vulnerable, you've really got to make sure that you, as a vessel of information, of guidance, of hopefully wisdom, are a clean vessel. You're never going to be completely clean. We can have a slightly dirty vessel. That's okay. You're going to have to decide whether you are clean enough as a vessel. If the fact that you're asking me this question would indicate to me that probably what you're looking for is the answer that says maybe take a little bit more time to be more recovered. Not just from the narcissistic abuse of your last relationship, but of the things that have occurred in childhood. The more recovered you are and the more healed you are, the better you will do. But don't wait for some magical moment of perfect nirvana healedness in order to get work done. If you're doing standard life coaching where you're helping people set goals and move forward with their life, I would be less concerned. I'd still be be concerned for you. I want to be recovered for narcissistic abuse for yourself. Your life will make more sense and you will be a better coach the more recovered you are. But don't hold on to fetishistic fantasies of perfection. Hold on to fetishistic fantasies of everything else, but not perfection. Whatever you like.
Kathy Mitchell asks, how do I get off antidepressants?
Kathy Mitchell asks, how do I get off antidepressants? I am not going to be lured into giving medical and legal advice. Kathy, as I understand it, and I am not a doctor, and all the information I give here is purely for information purposes only, as I understand it, Coming off antidepressants can be very problematic. So it's definitely something that should be done according to the guidance that is offered you by your whoever prescribed you the antidepressants. Read the instructions from the manufacturer, contact the manufacturer, go and get a second and a third opinion, because it's your health and it's your mental health that we're talking about. And when you're coming off antidepressants, as I understand it, it can be your physical health. It can be very physically damaging apparently as well. So my answer would be seek proper medical guidance and be very, very careful and very conscientious in how you do this.
Catherine Flowers asks, how come I cannot remember any conversations with my mother?
Catherine Flowers asks, how come I can't remember any conversations with my mother? I don't know, mate. Sometimes, I mean, I don't know whether you're talking about childhood conversations, or I don't know if you're talking about conversations that you had with your mum yesterday. If you can't remember conversations that you had with your mum yesterday, then you should definitely speak to a medical professional ASAP, because there could be something very, very seriously wrong. If you're talking about conversations from long ago, if the conversations were traumatic and the association in your brain and therefore in the unconscious with your mother is trauma and danger, as a safety mechanism, your mind might be cutting off the access to that which may hurt you. So that's a potential reason.
Right. Sorry.
You're all right. You're all right. We've got time. The Spartan Life Coach. Nothing is perfect. Always a bit of a mess.
I can't pronounce this name, so I'm very sorry. It's Muad Nazar.
Muad Nazar
asks, how do I increase my capacity for feeling pleasure?
How do I increase my capacity for feeling pleasure? That's a strange question. I would wonder what's stopping you from. I've coached people a lot over the years, and I've studied psychology for a long time. So my first question, and I'm not being obtuse, is: do you feel like you are hindered in your capacity to feel pleasure? And if you do feel that way, what is hindering you? And that hindrance must be removed. Is there a superego injunction from your stern puritanical father that you shouldn't submit too much to pleasure, because if you do, you become a moral degenerate? There's a lot here that I don't know. If you wanted a very surface answer to the question, it would be learn meditation, present moment awareness, and to associate fully physically in your body. Develop the muscle of full association, and you shall certainly experience more pleasure. I can attest to that.
English Roberts asks, is it dangerous to put yourself through new experiences that cause stress after getting over trauma, like it is an addiction to stress?
Is it dangerous to put yourself through experiences after getting through trauma like it's an addiction to stress? Yeah, you should never really be doing anything addictively. You should never really be doing anything that is like compulsive or neurotic, or that makes you feel like you're doing it not from a place of self-care, compassion, sanity, and progress. Addiction to stress particularly could be very dangerous. If you're recovering from trauma, I don't think there's a single person in the field of trauma recovery who would say you should avoid stress. That you should not avoid stress. All of us would say try to avoid stress whilst recovering, because you're already under stress. When you get to a point in your recovery with a professional who feels it's time and it's ready for you, then you start to lean into stress and to push out the comfort zone, but you would do that in a very structured, very organic and gentle way. So yeah, be very, very careful of that.
Katie asks, are you familiar with reactive attachment disorder, RAD? And how significant do you think it is?
Katie asks, are you familiar with reactive attachment disorder and how significant do you think it is? I'm only as familiar as I was the last time somebody asked me this on a live cast, and I had to look it up. I'm sorry. If somebody wants to write out what it is, my memory is gone. I can't remember what it is. So Am I familiar with it? I'm so unfamiliar with it. I need to be reminded what it is.
Healthy Love asks, will you be producing material for younger people, teenagers, and when?
Healthy Love asks, will you be producing material for younger people? I would hope to start that project before the end of this month. It will be a YouTube channel. There'll be shorter videos and they will be targeted at probably like late teens. The idea being to preemptively teach people to recognize the signs of narcissistic abuse so that they don't get into narcissistically abusive relationships, so they can clean up their own emotional intelligence and have the intention set to build their own independence and sovereignty and to become young adults effectively. That'll be the objective of that YouTube channel. Before the end of this month. Producing products, less likely. It's more likely just going to be a free information service that the young folk can tune into. This came from me realizing that a lot of the people that I speak to, the first narcissistically abusive relationship, they come out of it. The youngest people I speak to are like 28, 29, 30. Well, that's a shame. Like, I probably could have saved that person 4 or 5 years of stress and time wastage if I'd got them younger. So yeah, I think before the end of this month, there'll be another YouTube channel and it'll be announced on the Facebook page. I'll put it in the emails. So make sure you're signed up to my newsletter, which you can sign up to now on Spartanlifecoach.com to be updated on that.
Text Use Tweety asks, must I heal CPTSD first, then deal with my codependency?
Must I heal CPTSD first and then deal with my codependency? Yeah, this is it's interesting because it points to something that's come up a couple of times in the last week, which is healing is not linear and healing is not neat. It's not a neat process at all. So there isn't really, we can't really say like you do this and then you do this and then you do that. I mean, I try and make the coaching as systematic and structured as I can, particularly because people who feel like all of their structures have been knocked down need structure. We need a discipline. We need a structure. We need a this to do. CPTSD and codependency are, of course, very, very interlinked. You can't really heal one without healing the other at the same time. So you should be looking to do both at the same time. As your CPTSD reduces, so your addictive need for a fawning, remember it's an emotional flashback to fawn, enabling attached to a tyrannical person response will of course go down, because those feelings of anxiety won't be there. They're feeling like you must do that. The superego injunction that you must do that will diminish, and then you won't be there. So because the emotional flashback won't be there, the behavior to behave in that codependent way won't be as strong.
Gypsy Gun asks, is it common to stop yourself from succeeding when you have CPTSD?
Good Lord, I pulled my neck the wrong way. Gypsy Gun asks, is it common to stop yourself from succeeding when you have CPTSD? Yes, but beware the logical fallacy. Correlation is not causation. So you have CPTSD and you're aware that you are stopping yourself from succeeding. So it's not the CPTSD that's stopping you from succeeding necessarily. It's what caused the CPTSD that's stopping you from succeeding. Allow me to explain. CPTSD is caused by being raised in an abusive environment. An abusive environment means that you are not loved properly and cared for by the parent who should be stood behind you, encouraging you, saying, you know, be careful. The world's a little bit dangerous, but it's safe enough for you to go out and try things. Go ahead and do that. Also, I love you. You're okay. Everything is okay. You're loved. Now go and do that. That's not happening. But because that isn't happening, you're developing CPTSD. But also because that isn't happening, nobody's ever told you that you're okay. Nobody's ever told you that you're lovable. And so you don't really feel like you deserve success. That's problem number one. Problem number two is you haven't had a parental figure pull you through your first steps of being successful, because they weren't interested, they were indifferent to you, or they actually hated you and saw you as competition. So they deliberately stopped you from being successful through shaming you or guilting you. A lot of clients that I speak to, they feel as adults, like if they rise too high, they're going to feel terribly guilty that they've made their parent or parents feel less than. That's how deep the brainwashing can go. You know, in a good space, in a utopian world where things should be the way they are, your first experiences of success would be led by a parental figure. And it would be either follow me, do this, this, and this, and you're going to get the same results as me, and then you'll feel success. Or I'm going to stand behind you and encourage you to try. I've never done it, but I'm right here. And if you fuck it up, it doesn't matter. These are good messages. We need to hear this from parental figures. This is what coaches do when we're taking the role on of being a parental figure. We say, just try it. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. Rather than, oh, if you fuck that up, then you're a fucking idiot. And then there's going to be loads of guilt and shame and scorn that's poured on you. That makes you feel terrible. So then from a neurolinguistic programming point of view, every time you try and move forward and try and be successful, you feel guilt and shame and feel terrible because you now have this neural connection between trying something new, trying to be successful, and feeling terrible. And that can take years to overcome. I hit that particular problem myself directly with hypnosis and with neurolinguistic programming, where I was like, I'm going to burn out the circuitry so that I just feel safe and feel okay trying new things and getting out there and getting stuff done. I hope that helps.
Petra Barnes asks, can MPD cause anorexia?
Can NPD cause anorexia? I don't know whether you mean, well, the first thing I would say is anorexia typically, I think the thick end of the wedge statistically for anorexia is young girls, more than boys or older adults, older humans. So it's usually younger girls. That's the thick end of the wedge for anorexia. I have seen a correlation between anorexia and classic, overt, arrogant, narcissistic personality disorder having fathers. So if the father is an overt narcissist and is very openly narcissistic, I've seen that. I think I've seen a correlation. I think this is just my dumb opinion. This is not peer-reviewed research. There's a correlation in creating anorexia in a teen girl. There could be many reasons for that. I mean, this could come down to unpleasant comments, quite simply down to unpleasant comments made by the father, by his view of female beauty and female attractiveness and female ugliness that he then conveys down to the daughter, that is highly judgmental, highly superficial, and creates like a virus of obsession with the body image. But I don't know whether your question actually was, can people with NPD develop anorexia? And so to both potential questions that you're asking, I'm saying yes to both. Yes, NPD in a father can create anorexia in a daughter. And yes, NPD in an individual, of course, can create anorexia. I mean, NPDs are control freaks. They're very image focused. If the in men and in women, but probably more so in women, if the source of power and narcissistic supply is beauty, and I live in an environment where skinny is beautiful, then I'm going to do what it takes to get my power, please. I'm signing up for power. I'm signing up for narcissistic supply. And if that means I just don't get to eat and it's going to hurt, then I'll pay that price. I've seen that at close range in several people, where I wouldn't say the NPD, like if you say the NPD caused anorexia, it's more like the anorexia was just a natural lifestyle choice to get them where they wanted in order to feed the NPD addiction, which is for supply and for power.
Well, I don't know if you're looking to adopt, but Annabelle Black asks, Richard, will you be my daddy?
Annabelle Black has asked, will I be her daddy? I am not looking to adopt. I don't think I'd make a particularly responsible father at this stage in my life, but thank you for asking me to be your daddy. That's very kind.
Okay.
Next question, please.
Tina G asks, can a toxic childhood lead you to become an empath?
What's an empath, mate? It depends on what you mean. you know, a toxic and abusive family environment that's very hostile and full of conflict and of you experiencing a lot of pain would probably teach you that it is wise, expedient, and necessary to become very, very focused on other people's needs and on their meta communication, their body language, not the content of what they're saying, but the way they're saying it. If I am a small child and I have a father who's a rageaholic and he's violent, then learning the visual and kinesthetic cues for when he is going to become violent will be something that my brain naturally and unconsciously and automatically tunes into in order to try and stop me from being kicked in the head and killed by this raging monster. So yes, if you're talking about a fawning, enabling, hyper vigilant, hyper pleasing response, then yes. If you mean empath as in being a psychic, I really don't know. It depends on how you're using that term, empath.
Prior Mangala.
Prior Mangala.
Yep. Asks how do you feel not guilty after reporting narcissistic abusers to authorities?
How do you feel not guilty for reporting narcissistic abusers to authorities? I would be asking the question, why would you feel guilty for doing the right thing? What's causing that guilt to come up at all? Rather than just experiencing it and then afterwards going, how do I not feel that way? Look at the root cause, like what's causing you to feel guilty for doing the right thing, for, you know, for seeing justice done and for preventing those people from victimizing others. You know, you're doing a good thing and you're doing a necessary thing. So you've got to learn to be philosophical. You've got to learn to rationalize and to think things through and to let your thinking and your reason and your rationality trump your emotional response to things, and to learn that, you know, facts trump emotions. And this can be very hard for people with Cptsd, but it's also a fantastic skill to develop, being philosophical and saying, okay, well, where's the moral center here? What is morality? What is right and wrong? What is guilt? What is innocence? What is justice? Just be philosophical and have that conversation with yourself or have it with friends, and get it out there. Think it through. You know, what is the right thing to do? Is it right to stop somebody from doing evil? And is it wrong to not stop them from doing evil? Which is the immoral thing to do? So this can be a useful thing for people with Cptsd to develop a more three-dimensional way of cogitating around subjects that are complex for them, like issues related to morality, guilt, and innocence.
Derek Griffiths asks, tips to reverse my pathological negative self-critic.
Tips to reverse my pathological negative self-critic. I'm so glad you asked me that, because I have a product coming out in 2 weeks' time that focuses specifically on that. We have there is a product coming out soon called Silence the Inner Critic, and it is about tackling one of the major elements of Cptsd that I haven't seen being tackled yet. You've got your emotional flashbacks, which are the symptoms of Cptsd, but not many people really are addressing the fact that one of the causes of the Cptsd flashbacks and the ongoing style of thought and of feeling in Cptsd is a very, very highly activated inner critic, which is basically an infected and inflamed superego. So the superego, the moral judge, or what should be your moral compass, is broken, and is now, instead of saying, hey, maybe the good thing to do is do this, it's like super critical, you're a piece of shit, you're useless, you're this, you're that. There are ways of handling that, but the primary way that I would do it is, rather than attacking it and telling it to shut up or go away, is through love. So rather than attacking negativity with negativity, I think the better methodology, the more effective and long-lasting methodology, is to flood it with positivity. You just drown it out with good stuff. You just drown it out with positivity and with love. And the more positive and more loving message would be, you're doing okay. You're doing okay. So that's a message that you want your unconscious to be playing you instead of you are a piece of shit. So, you know, you need support in doing that, and it's something that needs to be practiced regularly. That the inner critic turns into a voice that just says everything is okay and you're doing okay. It doesn't need to say you're wonderful and you're the best thing ever. It just needs to say you're doing okay. It's safe. You'll be all right. And if you can learn to do that at the unconscious level, then you'll have kicked it.
You right? Tracy asks, Richie, she had 24 years together with her ex-partner. No contact for 4 years now. I hear that my diagnosed ex is doing the same behaviours as my 16 and 18-year-old children, I'd assume. How to limit their damage?
It's really, really tough. I don't have kids, and I don't presume to tell people how to parent their children. Having said that, I'm now going to presume to tell people how to parent their fucking children. Look, you, in my humble opinion, it is not good enough for any parent who comes to me and asks me this question to just be like, how do I deal with this over here in the system? You should be teaching your children to be boundaried, sovereign, strong, young adults. And that intent should be set very fucking clearly in your mind and in your heart. And every day and in every way you speak to them, you should be leading them in that direction. And the best way to do that as their mother, because you have huge power over them, is to go there first, lead the way, be a sovereign, strong, independent individual, show them what state management is, show them what assertive communication is, show them how a grown-up who knows how to deal with their own shit looks like, and do it. Be the thing that you want them to be. They'll follow you unconsciously. Tell them to do something, but you don't do it yourself, and it'll be like, oh, mom, that's bullshit. Be the thing you want them to be. You want them to be strong and independent. You want them to have the strength to resist his nonsense and his bullshit. Then you be as strong and independent as you would like them to be, and have the intention set in your head. You are raising young fucking warriors here. And that's, you've got to be, you need to approach it with that degree of dedication and passion. I mean, it's a hell of a responsibility. You get this right, you're going to have two happy people who live good lives, and every life they touch for the rest of their lives is going to be better for it. We fuck it up. We do a bad job. We're drinking on the job. We're high on the job. And who knows what will happen? They'll be just like us, sat here watching YouTube videos about Cptsd in 10 years' time. And we don't want that. We can't have that. You've got to break the cycle. So show them the way. Show them the way. What is the way? This is the way.
Very nice.
Thanks. I like that one. I got a bit excited. I think I got a sweat on there. I'll calm down now.
That's good. Yeah, we've got the hot lights on. It's good. You're doing well. Doing well. It's an hour.
I've done an hour.
You've done an hour.
The boy can talk.
Yeah. Good. So I'm sorry if I'm getting any of these names wrong, by the way. But you're not helping by writing some of these down. Poetriety.
Get some proper names, you YouTube people.
Ask, is it normal to struggle to accept a long-term relationship is or was abusive, even after a professional diagnosis?
Is it normal to struggle that a long-term relationship is or was abusive, even after a diagnosis? Hell yes, it is. Of course it is. I mean, especially if the abuse is coming through the modality that is normally called covert. So if the abuse is coming from a shy, vulnerable, or fragile narcissist, which is the proper academic terms for covert narcissist, the term covert narcissist is internet speak. It's what we in the online narcissism community call shy, fragile, vulnerable narcissist. But you go onto JSTOR and read research papers, there's not much talk of covert narcissism, plenty of articles on shy narcissist, fragile narcissist, and vulnerable narcissist. So if you've been dealing with a shy narcissist who showed vulnerability, terribly depressed, apologized all the time, seemed to be the victim, didn't really scream and shout at you and punch you in the face, but just made you feel like shit about yourself all the time, of course you're going to walk away from that going, was that really abuse? Was I abused, or am I hypersensitive? Was that abuse, or are they the victim? Who's the predator? Who's the prey? That's the game that they're playing. That's the bind that they're quite deliberately putting you in, is never letting you really know that the abuse is abuse. So yes, absolutely, it is common. And it is particularly common when the person is recovering from abuse from a shy, vulnerable narcissist, which is still a narcissist. They're just, when we say a shy narcissist, they feel ashamed of their own grandiosity, where an arrogant or overt or classic narcissist is not ashamed of their own grandiosity.
Shy Girl asks, one of my abusive parents is already dead, but still hurting me from the grave. The other is alive and estranged, but still vicious. How do I heal this festering wound even death can't cure?
How poetic. It doesn't massively matter whether they're alive or dead. The messages that you received from that abusive parent went in when you were very, very vulnerable, and you were just a child, and you went to that person for love. You like poetry, so I'll give you some poetic language from Shakespeare. You went to them for the milk of human kindness. If you know your, I don't want to get this one wrong, Macbeth, there's a theme in Macbeth about nurturing and motherhood and the receipt of love, and then corrupting the milk of human kindness into poison, into being infected with, spiders and snakes and darkness, and the milk of human kindness turning into the blood of vengeance. This is what was done to you in childhood. So there's a very, very hurt child who's still looking for mother's milk, who's still looking for father's love. It's never going to come. So are they hurting you from beyond the grave? From a certain stance, yes, they are. And from another stance, there is a child inside of you that is still thirsting for that love that is never going to come from that source. And that is a terrible, terrible thing to hear. It's a terrible thing to say to somebody. It's certainly not a nice thing to hear on a YouTube video that you've just tuned into. It's not the way you should be hearing it, but you should be hearing it. This isn't the way you should be hearing it, but you should be hearing it. And even if that hurts you very, very badly, I still wouldn't regret you being hurt badly by it now, because the short-term pain of you realizing that you're thirsting for love from somebody who could never give it to you and will never give it to you because they didn't have the capacity to, and grieving that and feeling sadness for that, maybe even feeling rage about that, is still better than the long-term pain of you spending the rest of your life stuck between two worlds going, why won't I get love? And you're even now going to the grave and speaking to the ghost and going, will you give me love? And the ghost is still going, fuck you, no, there's no love here, kid. There's no love for you here, kid. You still can't get it. So you need to grieve that and realize that it's not going to come. And but you can, just because they're dead and just because your parents did that, just doesn't mean love is dead. Love isn't dead. There's plenty of love in the world. There's plenty of things that you already love. So it's about a shift that needs to take place inside of you internally. Your internal map of reality needs to move. Everybody who is overcoming trauma, PTSD, Cptsd, neglect, outright abuse, imprisonment, torture, whatever it is, in order to overcome it, our map of reality at the most unconscious levels needs to change and shift. And that change and shift might be painful, but we need to accommodate the experience. So you're never, ever going to feel love from that source. It's not possible. It doesn't exist. But you can feel love, and you can overcome and heal from the fact that you'll never feel love from that source, because I did, and tons of people have. So we know it's possible. And you can still be a very loving person and go on to enjoy receiving and giving love to other people, and to expressing love in a normal and healthy way. And when you do that, you'll feel more joyful, because right now I can tell from the linguistic pattern and the poetic slant on the way you spoke that there probably isn't that much joy in your life. You're probably not experiencing massive amounts of cheerfulness and optimism. That will change when you go through the pain, when you transcend. There's a baptism of fire that needs to take place. It will be uncomfortable. You will cry until snot comes out your nose. But on the other side of that, there's a lot of good stuff.
There was a question earlier I haven't remembered who's asked it, but they said, where can they get their Spartan Life t-shirts from?
Where can you get the Spartan Life Coach t-shirts from? They don't exist. So the quantum field, if somebody wants to design me one and send it to me on Facebook, if there are any up and coming designers out there, and you want me to plug it, what I would do is, like, if there was a cool design for a Spartan Life Coach t-shirt, I'd put it on one of those t-shirt types. I wouldn't take any money for it, but those third-party sites charge you, like they charge for the cotton. They charge you like 20 quid or something like that. And we could totally do that, but you know, it's not my ambition to become a t-shirt salesman. So if anybody comes up with a cool design, I'll stick it on spreadshirt.com or something like that for sure.
1221 asks, you have a history in martial arts. Has that experience helped develop your theories and career choice? And if so, how?
You have a history in martial arts. Has that helped develop your theories and career choice? Whoa, I could go on about this for a long time. How many hours left have we got? Less than an hour.
Less than an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still teaching martial arts. I'm still doing martial arts. This is martial arts. My background was very strongly Japanese focused, and my major influences in childhood were ninjutsu and aikido, which are some of the most mystical and spiritual and magic based martial arts in the world. I mean, aikido, people think aikido is a self-defense style. It isn't. Ueshiba Sensei designed it as a means of self-development. It was purely for personal development. It is not, and he said this, and his grandson said it, but nobody's listening. It's not for fighting. It's the application side of it is, it's not about application. It's purely about developing the human spirit and unifying the human spirit. Similarly, the vision for modern day Tagakure Ryu Ninpo Taijutsu is about developing the human spirit and unifying the human spirit. How is it influenced? I mean, it's everything I do. Everything I do is influenced by martial arts. Another level, you could say the fact that I am good at and happy to piece things together and develop my own style and my own system is direct from Bruce Lee with his creation of Jeet Kune Do. He said, absorb what is useful and discard the rest. And he developed a martial arts style that was based on Western fencing and wrestling and boxing and Kali and Silat. And, you know, so I'm not, because I've had good teachers, I've had good teachers over the years that I could see face to face. I've had good teachers over the years that I could access through books and through DVDs. I've had good people show me the way, and you're receiving the benefit of that now. But it is still absolutely, this is self-protection, and absolutely this is martial arts. So yeah, martial arts is a huge part of the way I do things. It always will be until the day I die. I have no choice in that.
Just to break things up, I like to there's some comments coming through here, people saying appreciative of your work. So Susan C says, Richard, you would make the best father.
Richard, you would make the best father. That's very kind. Thank you.
Brittany, she says, you really appreciate your work.
That's kind.
And we have another one down here. We have some more. Thank you for your kindness. There's got lots here. Oh, bless. There's lots of nice comments.
Lots of nice comments.
Read back later.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have a look. Yeah, that's really cool, guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Let me just find one here. Please, can you differentiate between CPTSD and BPD?
Sorry. BPD. Well, I it's a contentious issue. This. I have said this several times on the channel, but some people just cannot hear me on this one. What happens now when people are diagnosed with personality disorders? You've got to understand that psychology is a field, not a science. It's a field of study that tries to be scientific. But it is not a science. It just uses the scientific method. This is a long lead in to me talking about the weaknesses of psychology, and it's still in its infancy, and it's incredibly naive. It's an incredibly naive field. So when you're talking psychology and fields of research and psychotherapy, and even to an extent, psychoanalysts, psychoanalysis, it's incredibly naive. What do I mean naive in the context of BPD? When we test people for personality disorders, this is still done via various self-reported questionnaires. You know, do you frequently feel like cutting yourself? Do you feel like drinking alcohol until you pass out? And you can choose, as an individual, answering these questionnaires to tell the truth or not. And frequently people lie, or they're giving an answer that they wouldn't normally give because they're pissed off with the psychologist who's given it to them, or they're giving an answer that they wouldn't normally give because they're sexually attracted to the psychologist who's given it to them, and they're trying to give the answer that they think will mean they'll bang the psychologist. We're humans. It's a bit of a mess when you turn the torch of human consciousness. That torch beam doesn't go back on itself very well. Consciousness cannot really see consciousness very well, but that is the essence of psychology, is human consciousness. That's what we're studying. So borderline personality disorder questionnaires, like all of the personality disorder questionnaires, like all of the psychology questionnaires that are out there, are like a shopping list, usually, but not always, but usually, of equally weighted traits that are being tested for. Is there intrapersonal turbulence? Is there a pattern of exploitation? Is there this? Is there that? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Very true, not very true, somewhat true, not true at all. You know how these things work. And so because of that, there are a lot of people walking around who have been diagnosed with BPD who I don't believe have borderline personality disorder. But my view of borderline personality disorder is not shared by every counselor out there, and is not shared by the whole of the psychology community. I have been very, very clear about this, and yet people just don't seem to be able to hear me. I'm very, very upfront. I am here for the victims of cluster B personality disordered people. I'm not here to help narcissists and people with borderline personality disorder. And I draw from the DSM. That has problems. My whole model of personality disorders comes from the American Psychiatric Association DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which can be critiqued all day long, and so can the American Psychiatric Association. It is not a perfect model, but it is, in my opinion, the best one for describing the cluster B personality disorders. So where I stand on this issue is, if it is not narcissism, it is not borderline personality disorder. Everything in the cluster B is a manifestation of narcissism. Psychopathy, histrionic, I forgot one of them. Psychopathy? No. Antisocial personality disorder, it's not psychopathy anymore. Histrionic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder. So here's what I would say. If you have been given a diagnosis of BPD, but you are not entitled and not exploitative, your diagnosis of BPD, in my humble opinion, is false. It is not borderline personality disorder. Why does it cross over with Cptsd? Because some of the traits or behavior patterns that they're looking for between Cptsd and borderline personality disorder do vector in together. Well, how do they do the statistics for choosing whether you have the personality disorder or not? They will literally say, for narcissism, you need to have 9 out of the 11 traits. For borderline personality disorder, I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but if it's more than 50%, then you're going to get it. So they don't equally weight exploitativeness and entitlement. That's me saying that. Psychology doesn't say that. So if you're not exploitative and not entitled, but you've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, in my view, you simply have Cptsd. This gets more complex, though, because strictly speaking, when I'm saying Cptsd in this context, what I mean is you're a person who has experienced long-term trauma and you're now emotionally dysregulated, which is affecting your perceptions, which is giving you interpersonal turbulence, which might lead you to cope with your emotions through addictive behaviors. But if you're not a fucking predator, it's not borderline personality disorder, in my humble opinion. The complexity is that even when it is borderline personality disorder, which is a manifestation of narcissistic personality disorder, but it is shy, vulnerable narcissism, it's all Cptsd. It's all within complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because these are all Cptsd responses, which is yet another thing that really upsets people, because what they want to do is they want to try and create a false dichotomy and a predator versus prey split, and just go, no, people with CPTSD are the victims, people with narcissism and borderline personality disorder are predators. And I would say no, it's just not that simple. It's just not that straightforward. I sometimes paint with broader brushstrokes than I should, because I am here for the victims. I'm not here for people with cluster B personality disorder. People who have borderline traits and narcissistic traits can be helped and can be healed. But if you have true borderline personality disorder, if you're truly exploitative, if you're truly entitled and you're truly predatory, I don't believe you can be helped. I don't believe you want to be helped. And I have absolutely nothing that I have nothing. There's nothing here for you. You don't belong here. We're talking about you. We're not talking to you. But for probably, based on what I've read and based on what I've seen in the comments from people getting all salty with me about BPD, looks to me like probably less than 50% of you, even when you're being a dick and you're being really salty, you're not being a salty dick in a way that makes me think it's BPD. It sounds just like CPTSD. It sounds like you've been misdiagnosed with a very, very damaging, predatory, nasty personality disorder that you just don't have. And that is to your detriment. That is not a good thing. That's not a nice thing to have going. And if I could, what I would like to do is convince counselors and psychotherapists to stop giving out this diagnosis so flippantly. And they are doing it flippantly, because they really, in the realm of personality disorders, there isn't really much that the psychologists and that, they don't know all that much, and they can't really do all that much for people. So yeah, CPTSD, obviously full borderline personality disorder is a CPTSD response. When we say that borderline personality disorder vectors in for CPTSD, what we really mean is emotional dysregulation. But I'm not writing a dissertation here. I'm doing YouTube videos that try and make an incredibly complex subject simple in a way that is functional so that people can help themselves. What's happened with the TV, La?
The TV's gone down.
That's no good, is it? Do you want me to turn it off?
I've got to come around. I'll have to come around the back and pull the thing.
Go on,
see my arm.
Oh, let's see your arm.
Shall I give you a question before I go?
Yeah, okay. You give me a question.
Okay.
And then Rich is going to come in shot.
Yeah.
Amy, biceps look big in this shirt, lad.
They do look big, don't they? They are big.
I'm going to tense up a little bit.
Yeah. You do that. You tense up.
I'll tense up. I'm not even tensing. I'm just like this all the time.
You're not tensing, are you? No. I'm going to try and get in there, sort of to the side.
Somebody on my one's gone, what's all this shouting? We'll have no trouble here. Is Royston Vasey based on Norwich?
It's yeah, it's based on Norfolk as a whole.
Oh, Norfolk as a whole.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Based on Norfolk, especially Tubbs.
Tubbs.
Yeah, with the nose.
Yeah.
That one.
This is for the American audiences. They'll be like, Royston Vasey, what are you on about? You need to look up the League of Gentlemen.
Incredible.
It's just pure Britishness distilled, chopped up Colombian style. Snort it down. You will love it.
Right, Jamie Lacroix.
Lacroix.
That's the one.
Jamie Lacroix.
In Norfolk, we don't do any other accents other than we'll just say
Jamie Lacroix.
It's like catchphrase. You say what you see around there. Do borderlines stalk?
Yeah, man. Sure they do. All of the cluster B personality disordered folks are going to stalk. They feel exploitative and entitled to stalk you. So if they feel like you're there, oh, did it switch itself off because we weren't using it? It went into a standby mode. Okay, sorry about this, folks. Minor technical issues as we learn. We're learning as we go here. Yeah, they'll stalk you because they feel like they own you, and sometimes there can just be a huge degree of emotional enmeshment at play, and they might feel like you're a part of them. I know that sounds really sick and really creepy, but of course, if you actually legitimately felt that way about somebody, you would start to get obsessed with them. I mean, I imagine for somebody who's not that way inclined, who's not exploitative, not entitled, and not a predator, imagine if it was a child of yours and they suddenly dropped off the radar, you would want to know where they were, and you would feel very emotionally compelled to find out details about what they were up to and what their movements were, and you would pursue them in that way. And you would feel entitled to do that. You'd feel like you had a right to do it. For the rest of us, I'm sure we've all felt stalky from time to time, but you would hope that good, healthy shame would kick in, and you'd just be like, okay, I want to stalk that person, but how am I going to feel afterwards? And do I have a right to look into that person's life? And how does that, it feels icky. I'm not going to do it. They feel icky all the time, so it doesn't really make that much difference. So yeah, absolutely. Somebody who truly has borderline personality disorder will stalk you. Somebody who has Cptsd could be induced into stalking because, hey, abandonment anxiety. I mean, one of the core elements that makes borderline personality disorder what it is abandonment anxiety. And that is something that somebody who has Cptsd who doesn't have a cluster B personality disorder shares with the borderline. And that's why it can look the same. And that's why some psychologists will go, ooh, you have borderline personality disorder, because you will have massive abandonment anxiety. If you've got Cptsd, you're emotionally dysregulated, you experience a lot of trauma in childhood, it's highly likely that when you attach to somebody, you ain't going to do it in a healthy way because you don't know how to do it in a healthy way. None of us do. We have to learn as adults. It's quite embarrassing late in life. This is what healthy love is. This is what healthy love looks like. And you're like, oh, right, all that clinging, weird enmeshment stuff, apparently that's not healthy. That's not a good thing. You just have to learn how to do that. So, yeah.
158 Farms asks, hey, Richie, thanks for the years. Sure wish you had a program to develop group facilitators. Lots of Cptsd here in Montana and absolutely no counsellors with a clue.
You wish I had a program to develop group facilitators, and counsellors in Montana don't have a clue. What's a group facilitator?
I'm thinking like the training that you do.
Oh,
your Spartan life coaches.
It sounds like it's like a social. Is that a social work term? Group facilitator? Is that something you would have done in social work?
No.
Nope.
No.
There's just like a coach.
I think.
Yeah, like a coachy type thing. I mean, I certainly can. I've trained now. I have 3 Spartanlifecoach coaches. They're individual coaches. They don't do group work. I mean, if there's a calling for it, I can do a course for group facilitators, if that means group coaches like seminar runners or course runners. Counselors not having a clue. I mean, I'm 50-50 on this one. Like there are good counselors out there, but you do have to dig around. It's like a bit of a jumble sale. You've got to really dig around, and some of the people you have to dig past are not only just not very good counselors, they're actually so fucking useless that they're damaging. They'll actually take people in the wrong direction through their clumsiness and the silly things that they say to people. It is a problem. Like I said, it's a field, I think, that's very much in its infancy. It's really badly infected by naivety. It's also kind of stuck a little bit in the academic world. So it's like, it's about research papers and getting a name and getting published. And, you know, you're not rated on how many people you get better on how much better these people feel. Nobody rates you on that. That's not what the world of counseling and psychology looks like, which is why I don't work in it anymore. I worked as a CBT counselor for the probation service for a while, and I just thought it was the biggest load of bullshit I'd ever been involved with. And yeah, so that's why I got out. So thank you very much for your positive feedback. I would definitely look into developing courses like that if there was a calling. Thank you.
Ren Blonded asks, can you explain how a scapegoat child can develop codependency while the golden child develops narcissism?
Yeah. Again, you know, these terms get confused. I mean, it's part psychology, part online narcissism forum mythology, and it does get confused. And I'm guilty of contributing to this stuff because, you know, I don't insist on the proper use of the terms, and I've used these terms incorrectly as well. So you said, how does the scapegoat develop codependency where the golden child develops narcissism? So you need to understand that narcissistic personality disorder, in a certain sense, is the greatest form of codependency there is. A codependent like you or I might be somewhat dependent on the positive regard of one person. The narcissist is wholly dependent on the positive regard of everybody else because they cannot give themselves any kind of positive regard. That's why they're so desperately and hopelessly addicted to narcissistic supply, and why fighting for narcissistic supply is quite literally for them a battle for their psychological survival, as surely as it would be a battle for you to survive for oxygen if you were drowning. That's why they do and say the disproportionate, crazy, exaggerated things that they do and say. So it is still codependency after a fashion. How does it become different things? Well, I think it's fairly simple. So if we accept this misuse of the term codependency, a term that I also misuse, and if you're misusing it, you might have got this from me. It should be, we should give it like a longer title, like the codependent fawning enabler echo, the echo to the narcissist. So the fawning codependent, why does it happen this way? Sam Vaknin made a nice little equation, a nice balance to this. Let me see if I can remember it right. The narcissist has a very good grasp of everybody else's, of the truth of other people. Like they're great at scanning other people and figuring out where other people are at, but their sense of themselves is very, very weak and very, very delusional. The codependent, wink, the codependent fawning enabler, echo, has a very good grasp of themselves, but a very poor view of other people. So when these two come together, this one can very, very easily coerce the perspectives and the emotions of this one. The narcissist, if I can continue from where Sam Vaknin said and say, well, and build on that, the narcissist is always right and nothing is ever their fault. Everybody else is always wrong and everybody else is always at fault and to blame. For the codependent, they're always wrong. Everybody else is always right. And no matter what happens, the codependent is always to blame. So you see this dynamic that builds. Well, this comes straight from the golden child and the black sheep. In childhood, if I'm the parent, nothing you ever do, nothing, there's nothing you can do will ever be good enough, and you'll always be a piece of shit. There is no achievement you can make. There's nothing you can do. You'll always be a piece of shit. The golden child, everything you do, darling, is perfect. Everything, even were you to go out and get drunk and then kill somebody, you're still a perfect child. It's not your fault. It's the stupid person's fault for walking along the street. There's been cases like this in America. In fact, I think there was a case where a guy, some young rich kid, killed somebody drunk driving, and then the mum, didn't she drive him off into another state and they ran away together for a while?
I'm sure about. I remember Hulk Hogan's kid did something similar.
Did Hulk Hogan's kid do something like this? So there was a term that came out. It was something like richerexic or wealthorexia or something, that somebody, like a journalist, made up a term for these wealthy kids who just develop like this context specific narcissism where they think they can do whatever the hell they want. There's been rape cases in America. A guy is accused of getting together with his friends and gang raping a girl. And I heard the father's defense of his son, and I was like, it's you fucker. You're the one who's made him like this. I wanted to wring the guy's neck. Obviously, the son needed his neck wringing too. Maybe they could wring both their necks at the same time. But it was the father. When I read what the father said, I was like, you've done this. You've made this shit the piece of shit that he is by golden childing him, by making him never wrong. So if you take like, imagine it as like a mathematical formula or a physics formula, it gets very clear. You know, you're always wrong. Everything is all your fault. Grows up into a codependent, thinks they're always wrong. Everything is always their fault. And then has a sense of self that is like quite realistic about who they are, but very unrealistic and neurotically naive about others. This one, nothing you ever do is wrong. Everything you do is always right. Has a sense of self that is totally fucking delusional, but quite cunning and astute at measuring the strengths and weaknesses of others. and as a superego that's telling them you're perfect. Nothing, you can never be wrong. Everything that goes wrong in your life is always other people's fault. So I should write that down. Maybe make somebody. I'm going to pay somebody to make a graphic of that. That's probably a good idea. Infographic. That's what I'll do. Yes. Excellent.
7 and above asked, Richard, you say grief is important to heal. I have been grieving all my life. Where did I go wrong?
It's not enough. Feeling grief in and of itself is not enough. It's one of the essential components of healing, but it needs to be guided and needs to go in a certain direction. And I don't know you, so I don't know that you're not just feeling the same sadness over and over again and not necessarily grieving. And I suspect that you don't know either. You might need some support. You might need some help with that. And you need to make sure that you're very careful in recruiting somebody who is the right person to give you that help with the grieving process. The overcoming of Cptsd ultimately is always going to be about grieving. Just because you felt sad your whole life doesn't mean you've been grieving your whole life necessarily. If you're stuck in a grief cycle and not moving forwards, then there might be something else that needs to be helped with there. This is a very, very limited format for me to be offering you that kind of very, very deep coaching and advice, which is really the realm of a psychotherapist. So sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that. I'd need to see you and poke around and ask more questions. I could sing a song.
I think you should sing a song. I'm trying to find a question. But I think people are asking each other questions.
Right, they're just chatting to each other now.
Yeah. There's a lot of chat going on here.
Where can I order a pizza at this time in Montana?
Yeah. Bear with me.
No problem. No problem.
They're talking about influenza.
Good heavens.
Yeah, there's a lot of influenza going on.
And other medieval diseases.
Right. Do you think this is from Annie S. Do you think it's smart to read Eckhart Tolle or Tolle if you're a codependent?
I don't think it's not smart. If you're a codependent, you got Cptsd elements there. Eckhart Tolle it's not smart to read him. I think that where he's coming from and what he's going to guide you to do, it assumes a certain level of development that most of us just don't have. And that can be very frustrating, make us feel like we're doing something wrong, make us feel like we've missed something or that we're just not listening to him properly. But simply put, like, you can be theoretically 100% right, but be 100% wrong in application. So his point of view would be everything is about acceptance. Everything is about non-attachment. Everything is about being in the moment. Everything is about being back in the body. And all of the healing can take place now. And all of that is true. It's all theoretically true. And it's stuff that I would use in practice and coaching with people. But I'm also sensitive to the certain other niggling issues that Cptsd people bring with them and people with childhood trauma bring with them. Like, if I ask you to sit still and to think about nothing, which is the essence of pure meditation, and to accept the moment with no thought, the chances of you going into an emotional flashback right then at that point in time are extremely fucking high. And the emotional flashback that you'll go into will probably be either dissociation or a massive amount of self-loathing and shame that you can't do it. So it's not wrong and it's not smart, but we might need to put some structures in place before we can really enjoy Eckhart Tolle's teachings. And they are great. I mean, he's a very intelligent guy. I do think he genuinely represents a higher consciousness. And I think that the teachings that he's offering people are good teachings. It's just that for some of us, it can be very, very aggravating. and it's just not where we should be going at first.
Andy Boone asks, is schizoid behavior related to CPTSD?
Is schizoid behavior related to CPTSD? I mean, I'm a CPTSD guy. I love the Pete Walker's book, CPTSD From Surviving to Thriving. And since I read it, I've taken it on as a kind of Bible. I hope I'm not too dogmatic about it, but really it describes all mental health issues. So like whatever mental health issue you can bring up, I'm going to be describing it in a CPTSD framework, in a Pete Walker-esque framework, because it makes sense to me. It's logical to me. It has a structure that is reliable and useful, and there's always a solution. If schizoid behavior, the avoidance of people and withdrawing and self-isolating is a manifestation of CPTSD, then the reduction of inflammation of the inner critic, which is rampant in people who are schizoid, and the outer critic as well. They're also, not wanting to be around people because they don't think other people are doing particularly fantastic things, and they find that aggravating and annoying. Then if we and also reduce the emotional flashbacks that are holding the schizoid behavior in place, then that means we can deal with schizoid behavior in a way that is effective. So for me it is, but other people working in psychology will say not. I hesitated to say psychologist there because I found out the other day the term psychologist is a protected term in America and in Canada. Did you know that?
No.
In the UK, if you say you're a psychologist, it basically means you work in the field of psychology doing psychological stuff. But in America and in Canada, it's a legally protected term. It's the same as saying you're a clinical psychologist. So for English people, I just have to be careful saying the word psychologist. I'm not a psychologist in America, but I am here because it doesn't mean that much.
And you are in England.
And I am in England. Physically, and I am English. So here I am a psychologist. In America, I am a bumbling buffoon in a red coat.
Get you by.
It does. The ladies love it. Especially my powdered wig.
Donna Cheshire asks, as a parent, what does recovery look like when you have a diagnosed BPD child, late teens, that terrorizes you daily?
Recovery for who? For you or for your?
I believe she's talking about herself.
Her recovery.
Yeah.
I in the context of having a BPD teen daughter, what would recovery look like for you? I don't know. I mean, it depends on what it is you're asking that you're recovering from. If you're talking about childhood trauma, if you're talking about recovering from the effects of having a BPD daughter, if you're talking about recovering from the effects of whatever traumatic events took place that led you to where you are now, I don't know. I mean, recovery for most people looks like an improvement in their emotional intelligence, feeling sane, wanting to do new things, no longer wanting to do things that used to hurt them, no longer wanting to do things that were addictive or that just represented some kind of momentary pleasure that they would get that would stop them from feeling in pain or depressed or anxious all the time. That would be what recovery would look like for most people.
Anna Gig asks, what was the last book you read, Richard?
I have tried, I wanted to get back into reading books and to stop staring into my phone as much. Around the time that I resolved to get rid of my TV and get rid of my PlayStation. And so I'll try and remember the last 4 books that I bought. I didn't finish any of them because they pissed me off. Certainly one of the Game of Thrones book I tried to reread. I bought a book by Dan Kennedy, who's an American sort of marketing business guru who I really, really like. And I did enjoy that book, but I didn't have time to finish it, and I was moving house and I gave it to somebody. So there's a Dan Kennedy No BS Guide to Marketing. Highly recommend that. One of the Game of Thrones books, but it was back the way that I'd read like 5 years ago. I tried to read it again and I thought it was garbage. Really hated it. doing my head in too many names and people, and I wasn't feeling it at all. And what was the other book that I threw away because it was annoying me? I can't remember. There's been so like the last book that I read from cover to cover was in America, and I was flying a lot, and it was a sci-fi book, and it wasn't great, but it pulled me in. And it was about a guy who starts jumping between different quantum realms, and it was like a nice little airplane ride sci-fi story. I can't remember its name, but that's definitely worth a go. And then before that, it was the author for No Country for Old Men, whatever his name was, and then he wrote a book that's really graphic and violent and nasty, that's about the Old West, and I can't remember his name or the name of the book, but that was a good book. There's a picture of it on my Instagram. Cannot remember it. Go look on my Instagram. Richard lowercase Grannon. Insta fame, homie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Margaret Bentley asks, how long did it take you to trust and date again post Mpd brainwashing?
I don't trust anybody, and I don't date, because fuck all humans. No.
And we're out.
And we are done. Dating and trust. After my last NPD experience, trust wasn't really a problem. It was kind of weird. And so my personal experience will not help you, because I do this for a living. So I realized that I was involved with somebody who was very sick, and it had zero impact on my trust. If anything, perversely, it made me more optimistic, because I caught them so early on. And I was like, oh, of course, you didn't see this, you didn't see this, you didn't see this. Then you saw them doing this, this, and this. And I think they lasted maybe 3 weeks. They got out of me, and then boom, I caught them, let it go. No ill effects afterwards, wasn't stuck on them at all, wasn't anything. And I was like, holy shit, I think I just grew a fucking boundary at age 39. And that made me really, really hopeful. That made me feel the opposite, which was like, oh, you can trust people if you're switched on, if you've done the work, if you know what you're looking for. Like most narcissistically abusive relationships, like we all tell ourselves the story like, oh, it's a trust issue. How am I ever going to trust again? Look, don't just be the person you were when you started your last narcissistically abusive relationship. They're always started in chaos. They're always started by, I was in a really bad time in my life, or I was in a transition phase in my life, or I just turned up to a new country, or I just lost the business. All of us start these things when we're vulnerable, and that's how we get sucked in. So live a sane life, live a good life, tidy your room, as Jordan Peterson would say. Get all your ducks in a row, sort yourself out. Don't need people. Don't rush into relationships. Let them show you who they are. They will do that. Like we all talk about them like they're the most amazing con artists ever. They're these alpha predators. They're not. They're not apex predators. They're not alpha males and alpha females. They're fucking losers. They're losers. They're dopes. They're always a mess, and they always end up screwing their own lives up. So just listen to what they're saying. Open your ears, open your eyes, look at them, listen to them. They'll show you who they are. So after my last NPD experience, zero time. I just was like, I'm glad that happened. I've never felt more optimistic about being in love in my life. To give you, so my personal experience is not going to help you on this occasion. To answer your question in a way that would help you, you really got to look at your own recovery. Take your mind off the next relationship and the next big thing. It's all a distraction, and it's all an opportunity for more, not necessarily narcissistic abuse, but for more drama and gibberish and childish nonsense in your life. Sort yourself out. Sort yourself out. Live a good life based on your preferences and who you are. Do what you want to do. Let that relationship junk come second, because a lot of it is junk. We're totally oversold on romantic relationships, and it's a brainwashed, ridiculous idea, and it gets so absurd and so overdone that it gets to the point where I am speaking to adult human beings. I don't mean you, madam, who asked me this question, or anybody watching this, but frequently I'm speaking to adult human beings who clearly believe that another person is going to come into their life and solve all of their fucking problems, their sexual needs, their financial needs, their fucking career needs, the house they're going to live in. And I'm like, that is insane. You can't put that much pressure on another human being. We're humans. The person who you're putting all that on is as confused and vulnerable and frightened and anxious and insecure as you are. They still have to put socks on every day. They're just as dumb and silly as you are. Why would you put that on another human being? We're really setting ourselves up. Men are just as bad as women for this. I talk to men all the time that we're lost in fantasy, and we have to wake up. We got to wake up from the Disney fantasy. No other human being can chew your food up and digest it for you. So you've got to kind of purify yourself of that notion. Another person may come into your life that is already a full life that doesn't need completing, and you may enjoy some time together. And that time may be 2 years, it may be 60 years, but that's all that can happen. Doesn't get any better than that. If you try and make it more than that, I guarantee you'll sink like the motherfucking Titanic. Mic drop. Boom. We still got time though.
Cut to the wide.
Yeah.
Right. Nurgle asks, do you think UK journalists and pundits, politicians, and cultural critics of like music, movies, TVs have a high incidence of narcissism?
That's interesting. We were discussing that just before.
We were.
It does seem to be the kind of field that attracts people who have a certain worldview that is particularly malevolent a lot of the time. I have met music producers and media people and journalists who are reasonable, decent human beings, but mostly my experience of them has been as evil, psychopathic, narcissistic, chaos-inducing, vengeful. Did I mention the word evil? Bastards. Really, really nasty. Really, really nasty. So my answer to your question is yes, you obviously have a perspective, and I agree with your perspective. It is a shitty, shitty realm full of shitty people, and we are all best off away from it.
Right, AJ asks, and he says hello first.
Hi, AJ.
Have you any tips on surviving being stalked by a narcissistic ex?
Yeah, I mean, like this could end up being a legal question. If you think that you're being stalked by somebody, you really have to tell the police. And it doesn't matter whether you're male or female and it's a male or female stalker. You should take this stuff seriously, because stalkers do hurt people sometimes. And if somebody is malevolently obsessed with you enough to take the time out of their day and the time out of their life to follow you round, that's pretty serious. The police will give you better advice than I can on how to deal with that. I'm not the person to give you advice on it. My understanding is the best thing to do is to record all incidents in a very organized way and to let the police know what is going on. The police won't really, in all honesty, be massively interested until there is an escalation that represents a breach of the peace in the UK or a breaking of the law, as it would be everywhere else. But tips in terms of like what to do to get rid of them. I mean, you know, as far as narcissism goes, if they're not getting what they want from you, they slowly start to suffocate, and eventually they have to find a new source. If you're not giving them any feedback or any oxygen, they have to go elsewhere in order to survive. Otherwise they suffocate. So do all you can to suffocate them of drama and of emotional response.
That's what I want.
It's all right. Gives me a chance to have a little think. My brain I can feel slowing down.
Got to the wide.
Got to the wide.
Yeah.
Oh
Keep
yeah.
away from the wide. Can you explain love bombing?
Yeah, love bombing is a term, as far as I know, that's not originally from academic psychology. I think it's from American researchers looking at what happens in cults. And it was a term to describe a tactic used with new cult recruits, where they would be bombarded with love very early on, both to break down their boundaries and to give them an excessive positive attachment to the cult and to the group of people and to the group leader. Love bombing usually then follows a phase of a dropping off of such overt displays of affection, welcoming, and love, so that the person kind of goes into a withdrawal phase, like a depletion phase, and they will then typically fight to get that love back. As it plays out between individuals, sorry, told you my brain was going. As it plays out between individuals instead of a group, it would be me totally gassing somebody's head, telling them they're wonderful, they're the best thing that's ever happened to me, it's amazing, I'm in love with them straight away, we're on a soul contract, you're my twin flame, blah, blah, blah. And then at a certain point to start slowly just scaling that down, just to invite like a bit of insecurity in that person, to let them slowly, before they won't even notice it, slow boiled frogs, they go into withdrawal and then they start fighting and trying to win my approval back. That allows me to shift the power dynamic of the relationship to have them fighting for my love.
Karen Kendall asks, do you believe that H.G. Tudor is a genuine covert narcissist?
I don't know anything about H.G. Tudor. I know he runs a YouTube channel. I've watched one of his videos for a couple of minutes and I thought it was good. The information was good. It was called something like Start Small and Avoid a Fall. And he talked about a tactic used by narcissists that he calls thin slicing a salami, I think. And that rather odd visual image is a metaphor for a narcissistic tactic whereby they take small chunks from you. And what he was saying is, if you notice when a narcissistic personality is taking a small infringement on your boundaries and you deal with it as though it was a larger infringement, you avoid a larger fall further down the line, which sounded like good advice to me. But is he genuinely a covert narcissist? I have no idea. I mean, there's so many people out there now doing this stuff and so much good information and so many good books. I haven't got time to keep up with everybody. So I just try and focus on what I'm doing.
Cool. So Richard, we've got 10 minutes. Do you want to just give a couple of minutes on where you're at, what you're doing, and anything you've got coming up?
Where am I at? What am I doing? Coming up. I've got the thing for young adults coming up. That'll be a YouTube channel trying to help them to grow and to become young adults in in a cultural environment that is very low on teaching resilience and very high on teaching entitlement, which of course breeds a very psychopathic and narcissistic worldview, with a very, very fragile, non-robust sense of self. And I'd really like to address that and help in that way. I have my Spartan Life Coach coaches. I'm going to recruit some more of them and I'm going to develop that. And that's probably enough for now. That's probably enough going on. I'll do more of these, hopefully work with you again, Rich. Work down here out of the Success Force studios here in Norwich. Do some more podcasts, I guess. Elevate the production levels a little bit. Make things look a bit smarter, a bit more professional. Hopefully get the message out to more people across a broader frequency. I realize there's a limit to what I can do. It's just me sat on a couch in my vest, chatting and swearing and talking about films, even though people like that. And then there's the Strength of Mind coach project. Is also something that I'll be working on in tandem with all that as well. So yeah, that's what's coming up. Sure.
Okay, so just a couple more questions left and then we'll be
closing it
down. So Nikki Lee asks, why do they still bother you after they have a new supply?
Why do they still bother you after they have a new supply? Maybe the new supply isn't enough. Maybe 2 is better than 1. You know, they're infantile, so they're extremely greedy and unboundaried. It's not like they're going to go, oh, I think I've got enough narcissistic supply now. That's enough. I'll stop. This has satiated me. They're never satisfied. They're perpetually hungry vampires. And also there's ego, you know, they want to prove to themselves that they still have control over you. And the idea that they don't, or that you've moved on, is an affront to the ego, that they're not omnipotent or so powerful and beautiful and wonderful, that you don't care about them anymore, is a horrible idea for them. It's devastating. So they'll reach out and poke you just to make sure that they still have power over you. I think that's probably the major motivator for them doing that.
So Leah Shy asks, how does one train to be a coach with you?
At the moment, that is invite only. So I'm looking for the 3 coaches that I have now are all Scousers. They're all from where I'm from. And, you know, I've got my own personal reasons why I want that. I like people who are beaten up and broken and wise. So, and it's me that decides whether I think that they're going to be a good fit for what I want. As a coach who's speaking to people who've been following me for a while, they need to represent what I teach faithfully. So there isn't really a way of becoming a coach with me right now, and I don't see that changing. Only because I'm very, 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 very fussy about how vulnerable people who are following me are treated, especially the victims of narcissistic abuse. And people who are looking for a job or a career, or they want something cool to write on their CV, doesn't interest me, not at all.
Okay, so we're nearly out. So the guys, so if you want to, anything you want to leave them on, anything you want them to come back to, and yeah,
any parting thoughts? When you're traumatized and when you're in pain, your mind and your brain and your neurology and your amygdala and your central nervous system focus on the pain, because we're survival mechanisms and pain is a greater motivator than pleasure. And in order to survive and to continue to evolve and to continue to replicate ourselves, which is our strongest drive, we need to avoid pain. When we've experienced pain and we don't understand it, we can't shelve it. We can't put it away. So we remain stuck in this analysis sort of cycle, going over it again and again. In order for the unconscious to feel safe, we need to be able to wrap it up and shelve it and put it away and move on. So that what the brain is trying to do is it's saying, well, I don't want to get bitten by that colored snake again. What was its color? What was its effect? Where did it live? I don't want to fall into that fucking hole in the ground again. Where was it exactly? What did it look like? So you're trying to avoid future pain, and it keeps you obsessed. It's kind of like an evolutionary flaw. It's not very useful to be stuck on pain that happened such a long time ago, but that is what happens. So we need to be compassionate to that. You need to be loving towards that. There's no point in being judgmental and shaming yourself for it. Just realize it's an evolutionary effect. It's kept you alive. It's kept you here. You know, if that hadn't happened, none of us would be here now. But that we need to retrain that. Start to gently but firmly move your mind, move your consciousness, move your emotional intelligence back towards what you do want in your life, not what you don't. If it's more love, then focus on more love. If it's more trust, then focus on more trust. If it's more expansion and thriving and health, then focus on expansion and thriving and health and optimism and hope and joy, and moving forward in a way that is going to make you feel good and make you feel alive and vibrant and independent and sovereign. These are the things that will help you. This helps you to cultivate your samangat, your intent, your capacity to survive and to thrive and to live a good life. But that requires an effort, and it requires self-discipline on your part. Embrace that self-discipline and make that effort daily, and you shall be rewarded. And now we are finished. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. We're going to do this again. Let me know if you enjoyed it in the comments. And if you did, we'll do it again really soon. Thank you very much.